Okay, welcome everybody to your first fundraising tutorial session. My name is Fadi. I'm the Executive Director at Venture to Impact, and I am responsible for our revenue generating activities, our partnership activities, as well as the overall operations of the organization, including recruiting volunteers. This training is going to be provided by myself and one of our volunteers, Nathan Tableman. Nathan was not able to join me today because he had internet issues. However, you will meet Nathan in future sessions, and also know that Nathan was extremely instrumental in putting together this this session, and he actually built the PowerPoint. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then we can get into this fundraising. So today is really all about aligning your fundraising goals. So we want to kind of talk a little bit about that. From there, we talk about, in the next session, we will talk about target audience and audience identification and donor expectations. And then lastly, we will end with the kind of next steps and how to move forward. So again, my name is Fadi. I'm the ED at Venture to Impact, and Nathan Tableman is going to be my partner in delivering this training to you guys. One of the things that we're going to be doing is that we're not only going to go through best practices only, but we're going to go through best practices as well as kind of give you a case study and some real life examples from how Venture to Impact was able to pivot and cope during COVID. So we wanted to start with the last sharp economic downturn, the Great Recession of 2008. There are many lessons that we've learned from that event that I think are applicable to us in fundraising in the time of COVID. Although the 2008 recession was a banking related, monetary related recession, and today the crisis is really caused by a viral spread by the virus. The two common denominators are that both of these events brought with them a sharp economic downturn. So these are the kind of things that are really, really important to keep in mind, is that the lessons from 2008 and the impact on 2008 on NGOs and nonprofit organizations are still relevant today and are still really important to remember and talk about. So we're going to talk about 6 main components. Reaffirming your shared mandates, so values, mission, vision, thinking about how do you revise your fundraising strategy, revisit your fundraising targets and plans, reclaiming the narrative. So how do you really make sure that your organization is driving your own story and your own narrative at this time? And then what does that look like in terms of equipping your staff and your team and your board and key volunteers? And then finally, how do you reach out to donors? Reaching out to donors and partners is the most important thing for you to be successful in your fundraising. So we're going to start with reaffirming your shared mandate. So during a time of crisis, you should not shift the main purpose and goals of your organization. So for Venture to Impact, we exist to transform individuals, families, and communities out of poverty and into lasting well-being. And the way that we do that is by connecting really skilled individuals with communities and organizations that need their skills but can never afford them or pay for them. So that has not changed. In a non-COVID world, what we're doing is that we're actually putting people on planes, actually getting people to travel outside of their own cities and outside of their own countries, to go into foreign countries and to go into foreign contexts where they will collaborate with our community partners and our beneficiaries directly. But then now, how do we do the same vision? How do we do the same purpose and goal in a virtual setting? We are not changing what we're doing. And the reason for that is that we have been entrusted by our donors, by our volunteers, by our partners with this stewardship in advancing this particular mission and vision in this difficult time. Avoid any formal reorganization of your organization until this crisis has passed. So venture to impact, we didn't kind of wake up one day and said, okay, so it's really hard to put people on planes now, so let's just focus on a different issue, issues of domestic violence, or issues of supporting farmers exclusively, because that would be just a pivotal, too much of a change to our main purpose, which is transforming people out of poverty by connecting them to skills that they need but can't access otherwise. And keep in mind that the needs of your organization, the mission that your organization was founded on, probably now matter more than ever and are needed more than ever before. So it's a really good time to home in on what these are and really try to kind of align all of your stakeholders towards the shared vision and purpose of your organization. So you want to be realistic. Things have changed. When you set out your strategic plan in December of last year or in the beginning of this year, there were assumptions. Nobody assumed that there was going to be a pandemic, for example. So there were assumptions or things that we didn't think were going to happen that happened now. So how do you change your current strategy because of the pandemic? Your strategy must be rooted in these new realities. So you must reflect the new financial realities, the new viral realities, the new realities of having to change the way that you deliver impact. And the biggest lesson here really is for you to kind of postpone your longer term initiatives in favor of channels, of revenue channels that will address and stabilize your immediate revenue crisis. So you might be experiencing immediate cash flow issues, and your biggest win, and one of the things that we're going to recommend to you right here is that you don't look at things from a 10-year perspective or a 5-year perspective, but what are the things that you can do really quickly, launch really quickly in support of stabilizing your immediate revenue crisis. So for example, there are some cost-cutting initiatives that you can do, and then there are some programmatic initiatives or programmatic things that you can do. So on the cost-cutting, for example, LR, Director of Operations, is really involved in this piece, like how do we make sure that we keep our costs down as an organization, especially when we're experiencing a significant decrease in revenue. So simple examples are, maybe you had in mind that you're going to get a new computer this year. It might be that you just have to extend the shelf life of your current computer, use it for as long as possible or for at least another year, and carry that planned expenditure to next year or the year after. Maybe you're doing programs that are nice to have, programs that are not revenue generating right now, but programs that are just really meant to build community or to invest in your donor relationships. These nice to have programs right now should be subsidized or should be replaced with programs that are more likely to drive donations. So for example, we as Venture to Impact hold an annual conference in the West Coast to talk to our volunteers, to regroup with all of our volunteers and stakeholders and donors, and really talk to them about the work that we're doing and inspire them to stay connected to our mission. This year, because of the pandemic, obviously we couldn't gather everybody together, but the alternative that we came up with was a virtual version of this that was not costly for us to put together. So Aspire is our volunteer retreat, is a cost to Venture to Impact. This initiative is not something that Venture to Impact generates any revenue from. This initiative is an investment that we make in the community. So this year, we still wanted to make that investment, but it was really, really important for us to make that investment in in the volunteers with our time rather than with hard cash from our organization, because we're at a point where we just really need to conserve and be really mindful about our expenditures. So, now that you've talked about your strategy and you've thought about your strategy, it's how do you adjust your fundraising targets and deadlines? So, um, you want to move from the strategic side, what initiatives you're not going to be doing, what things you're going to be focused on, to what are the new numbers now? Like maybe one of your biggest supporters is an airline company, and airline companies are struggling right now, but every year they committed 100,000 to you as an organization. Maybe this year it's about having a conversation with them and saying, where are you? Can we count on you for 100? Can we count on you for 50? Can we count on you for $10,000? Just really kind of understand how these fundraising targets are adjusted. And then when you're creating new plans, really make sure that you have deadlines, because if you don't have deadlines, it's really going to be difficult for you to find the urgency to action upon the plans that you put together. And it's also really difficult to measure effectiveness. So if you thought that it's going to take you 3 weeks to put together a new plan and go out and hit the ground running and start fundraising for it, but it actually took you 3 months, then that's something that's really important to be aware of. If you hadn't set a deadline, you wouldn't know that, like, oh, this took 6 times more than we thought it was going to take. Like, what happened here? Why did that happen? Um, how do we make sure that it's optimized next time? Like, this is a really great place for you to learn by setting deadlines and then monitoring. Like, are you staying on plan and on time, or are things not going according to plan? And then asking why. Be realistic, like things just have changed. We're not where we were at the beginning of 2020, and some sources of funding might not be there anymore or might have refocused. So just be honest and be realistic around these things. And then also be optimistic. New sources of funding are opening up with COVID emergency response. So look into that and see how you can tap into these sources of funding for your organization. Additionally, here you really want to focus on reclaiming the narrative. So there's a lot of stories coming out right now in the media, in research, in lots of different spheres that your donors might be reading or listening to right now, that talk about how 50% of all nonprofit organizations are not going to make it through this crisis, how this crisis is going to affect the social sector in all of these negative or potentially detrimental ways. So you really want to make sure that you are getting your story out there. You want to make sure that you are driving the narrative of your organization. So ensure that all communication is reflective of the wider context of both the needs and the opportunities. So what are the needs on the ground with the beneficiaries that you're supporting? How are your beneficiaries or participants are currently accessing support to the programs that you're delivering? But then also talk about the opportunities. So what are the opportunities for engagement right now? How can your donors, your volunteers, your partners, your stakeholders be involved? What's that opportunity for them? What you want to avoid at this time is organizational crisis appeals that really kind of have the negative messaging, negative funding messages. We need funding or else we're not going to make it. We need funding or else our doors will be shut. We need funding or we're going to disappear. Don't make it so dramatic or so like life or death, because these fundraising activities are generally perceived as ineffective, because donors mainly want to avoid contributing to a sinking ship. If donors don't have the confidence that you are going to be making it through this crisis, that you're going to be continuing to add value to your beneficiaries, to engage them appropriately, to adapt your programming, to continue to solve that main purpose, that mission, vision, values that you exist for, it's going to be really, really difficult for them to say, this is a sinking ship, this organization is not doing well, but I'm going to invest anyway. They are more likely to invest in organizations that are more effective at this time. So for example, maybe you provide education to children and you also give them lunch when they are with you at the school. But right now, schools are closed. But you're just think about what you're doing. You're providing food to children who are food insecure because you feel like they come from a certain segment of the society where they are not getting enough meals or healthy food at their own homes anyway. And now these kids are home 24/7. So these kids need lunch still, and maybe now more than ever. So how do you bring your existing mission into the current context? Yes, schools are closed and you cannot provide the lunches that you used to provide previously. But can you provide food boxes to these families right now on a weekly basis to ensure that the children are having at least the minimum amount of nutrition they need to go through their weeks or days or whatever? Can you still provide food coupons and other types of meal supports and meal subsidies to ensure that the children that you wanted to invest in because of issues of food security are still provided with solutions from your organization on that same issue around food insecurity? So really claim the narrative, talk about the needs in your communities and with your beneficiaries right now, how your donors can participate, how your volunteers can participate, and then also really adapt your existing mission into the current context. You do not exist to provide school lunches. You exist to solve problems of food insecurity. And food insecurity problems is going to be solved differently during COVID than before COVID. Additionally here, you want to really make sure that you invest in re-equipping your team. The last thing that you want to do for you as an executive, as a fundraiser, as a staff member that's working on this project, to be training to be talking to your community, talking to your stakeholders, talking to your volunteers and partners about your new direction and where you're taking the organization and how you're realigning your mission and how you're solving these really important problems during COVID, but then have your staff or your board members or your key volunteer not aware of that or not aligned with you on the same messaging, and then for them to be communicating that this is a sinking ship, that things aren't going well, that they don't know what's going on or how the organization is creating impact. Really make sure that you maintain frequently asked questions document on your website if you have a website and you maintain that. For us at Venture to Impact, we really decide to communicate about the program via email. So we've launched 4 email blasts. One email is going to be was really targeted around why we're doing this program that we launched during this time. It was called the Sustaining Member Program, and we'll talk about it in a minute. So why we're doing the Sustaining Member Program, who's going to benefit, what the value is. Then we talked about who we're training, the overall reach of the organizations that we're working with, and then estimated of how many community members will benefit because of the training and the programming that we're providing. We want to have also some kind of an update from the ground. So we want to hear from the organizations that we're training about how they're receiving this training and what impact it's creating in their organizations. And then finally, we want to make sure that we report on our impact. So thank you, donor, for participating. Here's our impact. Here's what happened. And then also here's what we learned. So you can have the confidence to know that we're learning from our mistakes and we're evolving towards continuing to advance our mission in this new context. And then finally, you just need to reach out to donors. This is the most important step, really. Like if you're not reaching out to donors and partners, you are not going to be successful at fundraising. Remember, donors and partners want to help you address your challenges. They have already supported you by donating to the work that you're doing. And this is why new donors might be interested in your mission. So initiate transparent and consistent communication about the impact of the crisis on your organization. So again, recognize that this is a crisis. Again, recognize that this is affecting your organization. But then also talk about how your mission is coming to play in this new context. Always thank your donors for their concern and support, but then also identify opportunities for their input, for their involvement, for their donation. So when we created the Sustaining Member Program, we actually got on the line and we asked people about it. And we said, this is what we're planning to do. This is what we're planning to launch. And here's how we're planning to create impact in organizations and communities around the world. And here's what we're planning to do. What do you think about that? Do you have any questions? Do you have any thoughts? Do you have any ideas for us to improve this? And then we identified places for our volunteers and donors to participate. So our volunteers and donors are mentors to you through these programs. They are building curriculum. They are helping us with various different initiatives that we're working on in respect to this program, because we think it's really, really important for people to be a part of the work that we're delivering and a part of our new way of bringing our mission into the current reality. So if you're a visual learner, really what we want to kind of help you understand and help you really kind of get familiar with here is this process. So begin with examining your plan. So examine your organization's current 2020 fundraising plan. Calculate actual revenue against targeted revenue. So how much did you think you were going to get in revenue this year, and how much did you get thus far, a year-to-date revenue actuals? And then pay attention to that performance and ask yourself, what happened? Can you identify what happened? Did some of your donors lose their jobs and can't support you anymore? Did some of the programs that you received funding for get canceled because of COVID? What's happening? And just really identify where you are, the year-to-date target versus actuals, and then try to figure out what happened. Review your assumptions specifically for your top 10 pre-pandemic revenue sources. So if your pre-pandemic revenue sources included a gala dinner or some kind of physical event, that probably wasn't going to happen. So you review your assumptions and either like affirm, say like, oh yeah, this is still going to happen because it's just the donation that we get from this private donor or from this company annually, and they're good to continue this year, or adjust, like this gala isn't going to happen, but maybe we're going to do an online fundraiser or whatever. And then revise your targets. So I really want to make sure that you are honest with yourself and with your team and with your board, and just look at what you thought you were going to be bringing in, and then ask yourself that in light of this new climate, what is my new target, and how much will I really be bringing in right now? And then based on that, create a new plan. You really want to move forward with a new plan. You don't want to be working off of plans that are old, that are irrelevant, that are not going to help you get through this crisis. So here's an example of an organization that we have made up and that doesn't really exist. But we just really wanted to show you a framework of how you can use the kind of fundraising planner or the revenue planner. And this is also going to be your homework for this session that you will discuss with your mentor. So you have the Jim Hortons Foundation. This is a fake donor, and they have $150,000 in projected revenue. Caring Canadians International's projected $150,000 from this donor. The original assumption is that they're just a strong donor. We've had a relationship with them for over 10 years, but then the revised assumption is that we've received this year's donation already. So nothing that we need to do about it, but maybe as next steps, in December, we will reach out to them and reaffirm commitment for 21. Hey, Jim Hortons Foundation, we would like to discuss if you are still able to make your $150,000 donation to our organization. Secondly, we have a funder called GAC, Global Affairs Canada, that's supporting a project called Healthy Hearts Project. Again, this is a fake project, but it's $105,000. And the original assumption is that this is the last year of the agreement. So we've had a number of multi-year agreement with Global Affairs Canada, and this is the last year, and we'll receive the last payment in November. So nothing that we need to do about that. But with Dr. J. Smith, it's $45,000. It's a first-time donor pledge, so they've committed to us just before the pandemic, and we've received 50% of their donation in 2020. So now we want to go back to them and really just make sure that they're ready to put in that last 50% as a year-end donation in December. The Harvest Gala, that's canceled, so that's $35,000 that we are not going to see this year. And then a monthly donor program where we have people donate on a monthly basis. We're generating $30,000. You know, we expected to see 2.5% growth from 2019, but what we actually saw is a 5% cancellation due to pandemic. So maybe people lost their jobs, maybe people aren't in a position to contribute monthly, and so Canadian Caring International or Caring Canadians International just didn't see that revenue go how it assumed. So we'll talk about V2I here, and how V2I adjusted is really important because we're an organization that literally relies on sending volunteers on a volunteer abroad program for us to be able to generate revenue. So these are fictional numbers, but let's say we've assumed we were going to get $150,000 from sending 20 volunteers to Nepal and $250,000 from sending volunteers to Romania. The thing is, the original assumption is that we're going to be able to send these volunteers, but then the revised assumption is that, like, oh my God, COVID's happening, travel restrictions, things are going to change likely. And the next steps is that we just had to cancel the program, both programs, because we couldn't deliver them because of COVID. So we also had we know that lots of people do virtual volunteering, but for us, that was not something that we were going to do. We didn't project any revenue from it, and we didn't project any focus on it at all. Why? Because we're a small team. We need to focus on our in-country volunteering experiences. Take a lot of time to move 60 people across the world in 3 months, booking their flights, their hotels, all of their logistics, making sure everything is really organized on the ground, having really great schedules and plans and all that stuff. Then the revised assumption is, well, we won't be able to travel. So can we advance our mission? See, like, still alignment to our mission. Can we still realign to our mission, but in a virtual setting? And then finally, the plan was, okay, we need to create a program to train NGOs through skilled volunteering and cover our budget gap. So With that, we really had to adjust our audience as well. With volunteering abroad, we're mainly going after new volunteers. 30% of our volunteers have volunteered with us before, on a volunteer trip or a volunteer program. But then the majority of the new volunteers, the majority of the volunteer team is typically new volunteers that we've never worked. And then in a volunteer abroad setting, we're primarily working with the end beneficiary. So that community member, that end user that we're spending time with on the ground day in and day out. In a virtual volunteering setting, we had to change that. We had to focus on our alumni volunteers because we didn't think that it would be easy for us to go out and get, 50 new volunteers that we've never worked with before, that don't know us, that don't have a relationship with us, that don't know our communities and never visited them and don't know how they work. And it was just going to be really, really difficult. And then we also had to pivot from working with the end beneficiary to working with the local NGO staff, which is you, because of many reasons. You're the first responders on the ground, so you are the people that need to be equipped to respond to the challenges that your organizations or your communities are facing. B, when we work with end beneficiaries, typically they don't have access to technology devices, they don't have access to the internet, they can speak English very well, so the barrier to reaching them directly and training them is really, really hard. So we had to change our audience, but we did not change our mission, and we're still transforming people out of poverty into lasting well-being by doing this virtual volunteering program. So the ask to our volunteers was join us in becoming a sustaining member and help us improve lives, the lives of people that we're working to support. We listed, complex challenges that some of the organizations and partners that we're working with right now are facing. And then we told them what we're going to do. What are the things that we are really kind of trying to target in terms of main issues that we want to work on. And then we said how we're going to work on these issues. We're going to have NGO trainings, which we're doing right now. We're going to have recovery plans so we can look at the intermediate term, not just always work on the immediate term. And then we're also going to invest in making sure that when volunteering abroad is safe, we're investing in making sure that our volunteers have access to the best infrastructure so we can continue to lead them out safely. So in conclusion, when you're thinking about realigning your fundraising, reaffirm your shared mandate, your vision, your values, your mission. Revise your fundraising strategy. Things have changed. Acknowledge that and revise your strategy accordingly. Revisit your fundraising targets and plans. So don't keep going with the old ones. Revisit them, create new ones, reclaim the narrative. So really make sure that you are communicating to your donors, to your stakeholders first. And then equip your staff and your members and your board members and your key volunteers to ensure that they're on the same page. And then finally, you have to reach out to donors. You have to reach out to them and tell them about the problems that the needs that your organization and your communities are experiencing, but then also discuss the opportunities for them to get engaged. So really, this is the main training or the main information that we wanted to share with you in this session. The homework or the task that you have before you meet with your mentors is to fill out your fundraising plan to make sure that your plan is now current and you can talk about your current opportunities in light of what's changed for you and your organization today. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope this was beneficial.